help but wonder where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Can't help but wonder where I'm bound.
All right, everyone, welcome to What's the Rush podcast with me, Rebecca Rusch. And this is where I invite high achievers to pause and to slow down and explore what's revealed when we aren't in motion. I'm really interested in learning from the wisdom that emerged, not in the spotlight, but in their moments of stillness and reflection. So today's guest is perfect for this. She's a powerhouse, Gabby Reece, a beach volleyball legend, dominating the court, becoming Nike's first female spokeswoman, which is really amazing. But she's so much more than an athlete. She's also an entrepreneur, co-founder of 2 businesses, including Laird Superfood. She's a podcaster, fitness leader, mother, wife, and for decades, Gabby has really redefined what it looks like to be strong across sport, business, and family. And what I admire most about her is her honesty and her willingness to share the messy parts, the hard parts, and the truth behind what it is to be human. So I know this conversation is going to be gritty and full of growth and wisdom. So let's get into it. Welcome, Gabby, to What's the Rush?
Thank you. I feel like you did the podcast already. I think we're good.
Well, there we go. It's already done. I want to start out because we share an athletic background. We're both former professional athletes turned businesswomen, entrepreneurs, lifelong fitness advocates, not just for ourselves, but for other people. So I want to start, since athletics are really the foundation for both of our lives. What did you do this morning? How did you start your day?
I actually yesterday I trained pretty hard, so today was a lighter day. I did some sauna, a couple rounds of sauna and ice, and I actually had the opportunity. This is a little extra, but I got to lay on a red bed this morning. So I tried to use the morning more to your tone today, just a little more because recovery oriented, because I have learned that just getting after it day after day after day after day,
Yeah.
in the long run, you pay a different kind of price it's not really that productive.
Yeah, and I love that you said that. And actually, you inspired me this morning because I was thinking I could sit and look at all my notes, or I could go out for a walk and walk the dogs and be in the sunshine. And so I went and did that, and did some breathing. And so I didn't do any hardcore workout or anything, but I did what I call a dog jog. So I went out with the dogs and got in the sun. But you motivated me this morning. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and your notes, you probably already know your notes.
Well, I take them, and this is part we were talking before we got on about just things work out. They just work out as they do. And so I take a bunch of notes and then I don't read them. So um I am excited to talk to you because I am a little bit of a fangirl. I met you probably 20 years ago. You probably don't remember. It was at a Women's Sports Foundation event. And you've been a hero for me for a long time. As an athlete in the 90s, I was rock climbing. And I didn't see anyone that looked like you in the magazines or that looked like me in the magazines or in the media until you came along. And here was this strong, tall, beautiful woman that redefined what an athlete looked like for me. And it was so amazing to see that, as a young athlete, or I was thinking I was in my 30s at that time, but a rock climber and developing a lot of muscle mass and paddler. And there I saw you and was like, wow, this is what strength and beauty can look like. And so I got to meet you at an event and I was just like, oh my gosh. And since then we've traveled in a lot of circles. We've stayed in it a long time in the sort of fitness industry. And so it's great to talk to you again. But I did have to tell you that you really inspired me as a rock climber and a paddler in that time, because I was like, muscles are cool. I think they're cool. And now everybody else thinks they're cool too. So you really, like, athlete model, you change the vision in media of what strong looks like. And what was that like for you to kind of be the trailblazer in that space? Obviously, your body is athletic. It's a performer. It's the package you were given.
Yeah.
But you seem to be one of the first athletes that people really resonated with, sort of on a visual level. Not that being in athletics is about how you look, but you
Yeah.
were one of the first women that was like proud and strong, and people really responded. Why do you think you were that person, or what was the difference at that time?
I think it's a couple things. I think if you looked at it culturally, I was just a reflection of the culture. And
Mhm.
so, sometimes you're really just a soldier for a message or, a steward. And so I think I was just a reflection of timing.
Yeah.
After Title IX and somebody's sister or daughter or mother was athletic and they were buying things on the marketplace. And so I look at it like that a little bit more, and the good fortune that I was there at the right time in the right place, and then secondly, maybe just the way I grew up in the Caribbean. Like, it never really occurred to me one way or the other that you were picking lanes and you had to sort of be one thing. It never
Mhm.
really occurred to me. It was just sort of like, oh, we are who we are and we express ourselves in all these different ways and what feels good and right, and lean into that. And in the very beginning, there was definitely pockets of frustration because, for example, I was playing volleyball in college and I started modeling, and it was really to make a living. I was on scholarship, but I ended up giving up my scholarship and paying to play because of the NCAA rules. And I remember my agents in New York were like really trying to, kind of fear monger me, like, hey, you got to do this now while it's happening and you'll make money. And I couldn't find people to help me push it all together. I had this idea about, well, no, I'm both of these things. And actually, I'm probably more of an athlete. And why not? Is there not a way to make all these things dance together? And then when I was at Nike, they would be sort of frustrated maybe that I wasn't as, like I would do a nighttime talk show and they'd say, well, would you wear a tracksuit? And I was like, yeah, no, I wouldn't. Because that's not what I would authentically wear. So it was interesting. Sometimes on both sides, there was a little bit of that.
I mean, how refreshing to grow up as a young kid, just and being accepted as you are, and that everyone's just showing up as they are. I don't think that that is typical for many of us, especially for kids now, growing up as you are, showing up as you are. I mean, you've done that your whole life, but you were born with it, it sounds like, or at a very young age your lifestyle was imprinting that on you.
Certainly it was, and I had other things that were a much greater priority to me. So, as a little kid, I ended up living with some really lovely people in Long Island from age 2 to 7 that were not my parents and really different than me. And also, when it's not your parents, it's like you almost have a different observation point of view.
Mm.
You're not just sort of going along, you're really noticing things in people, and you're a little more aware, I think. And then when I moved to the Caribbean and lived with my mother and my stepfather, who he was quite lovely. He was from Puerto Rico. There was just so much diversity, and I was oddly tall. I was 5 feet at 7 and 6 feet at 12. And my father is from Trinidad. My biological father is from Trinidad, and my grandfather was black, and my grandmother was white. And
Mm.
I saw people that were successful, but not that many. And so I was just around a different thinking. And so for me, it was really, I was focused on survival more than I was focused on, like, well, who am I going to be and how
Yeah.
am I going to show up in the world? And so I think that made it a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like that's quite a bit of sort of disruption and moving around and being with different people at a very young age. It's
Yeah. And so it liberates you. It's that hierarchical of needs, which is
Mhm.
like, yo, I better figure out what's going on. I better look to the future. I have to have 4 ways to get to where I'm trying to go just in case. So
Yeah.
I think it made me think about other things than what does someone think of me. I certainly had self-conscious years, my teenage years, like everybody. But and again, I wasn't. I was late to sport. I didn't think I was going to do sort of some of the things I had the good fortune of doing.
When did you're late to sport. When did volleyball come into your life, or on any sport?
I played a little bit of volleyball when I lived on St. Thomas, but nothing serious. And you know, I really thought I'd do high school and that was it. The idea of college never really occurred to me. And I often joke that I probably thought I was going to end up working like at a gift shop. And then my junior year, I got moved from the Caribbean to Florida. And because I was 6'3", I was 15, I went to this school and they were like, oh, and it was a small school. So they didn't have, if you were a good athlete, you were out of there because you went to a bigger school to get attention. And so they were like, you're going to play volleyball and basketball. And it was one of those things where I was pretty green, but they invested in me because I
Mm.
was so big.
Yeah.
And then I ended up getting a lot of offers, weirdly, to college. So in an 18-month period, I would say the trajectory of my whole life changed. And I changed. I went from being a little more rudderless to, my nature is to be self-disciplined. I've always been tidy and sort of those things, but to really go, oh, wait a second, my life in a year's time, because I was pissed, like at 16, I was not the happiest person. I was frustrated with my mother, like, everybody. But I remember thinking, pretty soon your life is going to be your own. So
Mm.
rather than spending a lot of energy rebelling and doing all this stuff, actually, what do you want to do? And then I had all these incredible people, coaches, and even teammates that were showing up in my life and sort of supporting me and inspiring me in a positive way. And I thought, wait, I could really sort of architect my life very differently than what I thought.
So sport became kind of your way out and a different peer group for you. Is that right?
Yes, and like a place to feel proud of myself.
Yeah.
After a practice, everybody feels proud of themselves.
Mm.
So, and it was then obviously going to college, having somebody teach you about personal accountability and then being a good teammate. And, I became an adult very quickly when I went to college. I went in at 17, but then by the summer after my freshman year, I started working and became completely independent by 18, and like bought an apartment at Florida State when I was 19. Like I sort of really thought, oh, I'm going to handle this. And it was really these people, a lot of really good examples.
Did you ever envision a pro sports career? Was it that fast? You're like, yeah, I'll be a pro athlete and then I'll be a sports model. And was that ever entering your mind?
No, because when I first started working in fashion, I was really in fashion. And yes, my physique sort of lended it itself to more athletic, a lot of athletic photographs
Hmm.
or natural, kind of like bathing suits and running on the beach and all that stuff. But I did a lot of high end fashion as well. And so this idea of professional sports didn't even exist for me. Remember, I was sort of
Yeah.
fumbling through, even though I had a good, statistically, a really good college career. It always felt like I was fumbling through it, and just kind of doing my best and trying to execute what was being asked of me. And then after college, I moved to Miami because I didn't want to live in New York full time. And I thought, well, I'm probably going to do this modeling thing. And somehow living in Miami, beach culture, I picked up beach volleyball, and it wasn't particularly good. For anyone who knows anything about volleyball, I'm a middle, and middles, we have sort of limited skills. We're not the best passers and setters and, things like that. So beach was a whole new game for me. And I had a woman there who played with me, who was certainly better, but she had a real job and she was in her 30s. And after, I guess, about a year and a half, she's like, you might, why don't you think about moving to California and try to actually do this? And I was like, that's where ignorance is bliss. And so I did.
Wow. I mean, so when did sport become like it started to become a career, not because you chose it, but when did it become really foundational for you that like I need to have sport in my life? Here you are, you've launched multiple businesses, raised children, and it's still athletics and fitness and wellness and sport, really born from sport. They're part of the fabric of your life. When did that start to show that like this is just me, regardless of your profession, but that your health
Mm.
was and fitness was always going to be part of your life?
I always trained really hard. And when college and the pros, I probably had a chip on my shoulder too. I had something to prove, but it was probably towards like the middle latter part of my professional career where you started to realize that the structure, the discipline, the output, the work, the honesty of the work was going to be something that I was going to be in pursuit of my whole life. And so one would call it lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe that concept entered. Performance was always going to be there as long as I was competing, but really then lifestyle started to show up, how I fuel my body, who I spend time with. All of those indications sort of came probably by my mid-20s, I would say. And then you just spend time after that getting educated and fine-tuning that, and having great mentors and things like that.
Did you have a break from your professional career to professional athletic career to your other professional careers? Was that a hard shift for you to go from always focusing on your training, your performance, to like all of a sudden like, oh, what should I do today?
Mm.
Was there a shift for you, or did you smoothly just transition your work ethic right over into your regular life?
In some ways, when you play, and maybe you can relate to this with rock climbing, when you play a lifestyle sport, snowboarding, surfing, skiing, beach volleyball, what have you, typically, even if you're successful, you kind of have to do other things. Like you're on a hustle of some sort, right? And so from early on, you figure when I was playing college volleyball, I was modeling. And
Yeah,
then when I was playing professional, I was doing, television, MTV Sports. I was writing for Elle magazine. I was, I was always on the hustle because the platform's so small.
yeah,
So in a way, the gift of that is that you have other skills that in a parallel path you've been developing while you've spent the lion's share of your time, 90%, training and practicing. But ultimately, volleyball didn't even accrue 50% of my revenue, even
right,
then.
right.
So the transition's a lot easier. And I have a self-inflicted, I know how to put framework around every single day, regardless of somebody. I don't need someone to tell me. So that's another thing that's been really helpful is if I have nothing to do, I always have something to do. And it's not busy for the sake of busy. It's okay, at this time I'm training,
Hmm.
I'm going to accomplish this. These emails are going to get sent. Those phone calls are going to get made, whatever that looks like. So I've always been hyper vigilant about that to create sanity.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not that way. I don't have my days all scheduled out, and I definitely admire that in people, especially busy people. It seems like that kind of structure is important. Do you think it came from athletics, or you're just naturally born organizer and structure person?
Yeah, it's probably a combination. I'm a Capricorn, and so I don't know if but every time you say that, people go, "Yeah, of course you are." Um, there's probably some elements that I was born to. It probably also got exaggerated growing up
Yeah.
with very loosey goosey adults. So
Yeah.
I hypercompensated. Um, and I used to set all the clocks in my house ahead and wake everybody up and try to get on to school on time, like pretty. So that probably got exaggerated versus having someone who took care of that for me. Um,
Mm,
and then being in sport and time management, I think you learn that in
yeah.
college. It's like you're doing a lot of things. You're in school, you're studying, you have games and practice and such. So I think all of
Yeah.
it together put itself into that framework and practice. But the other thing is, I have the kind of personality because my brain is sort of, I can definitely chill, but I'm a better person if I have productive things and challenges and problems to solve that are all moving in sort of one direction. Emotionally, I seem to be able to get to my lessons and my blind spots better when I have some of that framework set up for me.
So if you're in the sauna, are you multitasking and getting other stuff done? Or are you able to just kind of be like, I'm in the sauna right now. My brain is still, my body's still. So can you
Yeah.
flip like that?
Yeah, and I do have a stillness within the getting it done. I'm not I sort of still go one thing at a time. So if I'm focused on that, even if I have 50 things behind it. So I'm
Yeah.
not a pinger, and I call it popcorn. I'm not popcorning. That's not me. And also it's also recognizing those small windows of time in the sauna, on a walk, that it's time to be still and check in with yourself, because that's as important to being productive and busy, because then you go, well, where am I at? What's going to work? What's not working? Do I need to pivot? So I always use those times to really check in, to be guided, right? Because sometimes I'm always trying to grab the wheel. So those are the times I ask to be guided.
There's a lot in there, in we were talking about the hustle that especially female athletes have to do,
Mhm.
and of our generation. You couldn't just do your athletics. You had to have five other jobs, and then you're getting married and raising a family, and all these things you are multitasking as women. I think that's sort of part of the role of doing it all,
Mhm.
and female athletes as well. But to then be able to transition into the slow time, that's something I'm still working on, to be honest with you. And this podcast was born from a concussion that forced me a few years ago to stop. And I stopped doing my sport. I stopped doing anything. And it was really interesting, but really hard. I realized I'm really not good at sitting still. And so it's interesting to hear you say to find those nuggets in the sauna or walking the dogs, or, that stillness, I think, has to be learned in many hard charging athletes, many hard charging entrepreneurs, because they're so used to the hustle. That's kind of where I'm going with this question. We're so used to trying to grab that ring and get that thing done and get the next sponsorship or the next gig, that it is really hard to take those moments to settle and go, it is all going to work out. Because in our younger years, it doesn't always feel like it's going to work out.
Yes, and I do think that's a part of growing up, and really recognizing the notion of sort of measure twice, cut once, of slowing down, the importance of, and I use the discipline to do that, right? So I
Mhm.
say I'm going to fix my gaze,
Yeah.
on the on the silence, on the white space, on the, if it's if it's to the sky, if it's prayer, if it's walking and it's on the rocks and the flowers. It's like it's actually just taking that same gear that you're using to do a million things and say, yes, now it's time to, to sort of direct that to this open space, because it saves a lot of time, and then hopefully it's helping you sort of course the the goals and and sort of the plan that actually you want, versus just the one that you ran into.
Yeah.
And also not using busyness as an excuse or to avoid your real life, right? The inconveniences, the quietness, the mundane parts of it. I think it's very easy also to use, I'm busy, I'm getting stuff done, to avoid all that. So also to be mindful of that, for sure.
I like that you talk about, open space or quiet time, or as part of a discipline. Most of us don't think of it that way, or I don't. It's sort of like the thing that's left at the end of the day, instead of using discipline, as you say, to have your sauna time or your walk time or your meditation or breathing or reading or what or cooking, whatever it is, but using discipline to make sure that gets done so it doesn't get blown off.
You know, I don't, it's hard. Uh, I think otherwise it's hard for most of us to get there. And
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too, where the, I always, so if I've had any surgeries or anything, my doctors are smart and they know me, and they'll say, well, if you really want to be as good as you've been, or you want to be strong, or you want that to work, you'll actually chill. So they know exactly what to say to me to get me to chill, right? And so
Right.
what the framework for me around this idea of the quiet spaces is, hey, if you really are trying to be your best, and people talk about gratitude and things like that, then you will in fact build into the best of your ability, imperfect as it is, this type of practice, because it will in the long run make everything better. And so unfortunately, and I'm not proud of it, I am a person who it's hard to do something if I don't understand the reason.
Yeah.
And the moment it makes sense to me, I don't have to question it anymore. And so within the like, hey, I make the white space time is also because for me, I understand it's better.
I think that's what's great about science is finally catching up with a lot of these practices that aren't anything new. You know, eating healthy, drinking water, meditating, being in nature, exercising, these things aren't new, but there's so much science now that's actually showing the neuroscience really that's exciting to show that yeah, sitting and doing nothing is actually really good for your brain. And I learned more about the brain than I knew before with this concussion experience. But the
Did you
science is
fall?
finally, what's that? Yeah,
Did
I
you?
had a mountain bike crash
Oh,
and didn't get good care for a long time and was sort of piecing it out myself. Even with my professional connections, was really struggling to find the right care. Um,
what's a long time? Couple months?
2.5 years of really heavy symptoms.
Two and a half
And
years.
yeah, that essentially
Mm.
it put my life on hold. My work,
Yep.
movement, and so it's been a few really big years of introspection and learning to breathe and learning to relax, but also learning to find my sport again in a different way, in a non-competitive way. And so what's been exciting with a lot of the work that you do with, being a health advocate, the science is there to show us, the things that we kind of know are good for us, but showing like how important sleep is. And to your point, when people have proof, then they're motivated to do it.
Yeah.
And does it feel to you like there's a shift in the way people are living their lifestyles?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
I think what we all recognize, but we don't really know, including me, what to do is the things that are set up now in our day-to-day lives that we're using as tools for our work and for entertainment are also really hard on us. And so I think that we know a lot, but I think it's hard for us to figure out how to truly navigate it all. So, I mean, listen, if we hear the notion of EMFs and blue light and even our LED lights, um, just that, the air, all those types of things,
Right.
when everyone's like, oh, they've been spraying whatever they've been spraying for 30 something years, it's like, okay, so I think we do know, but I think the impulse and the addiction, including me, is so powerful, and it's crept into so many parts of our day that I think it is an interesting tap dance that we're going to have to figure out. That's why I bang on and on about people having a practice, because we all have every bit of information and every metric possible, but it's really about having a practice in place to fortify you so that like you just do the best you can.
Has your practice shifted over the years? I mean, it must have, from being a professional athlete to now. How is the have there been themes that have stayed with it and arcs that have changed, and how's that evolution happened for your practice?
Yeah, of course you always get all the good information after you retire, right?
Right.
I think I would have, in a different way, I would have trained more functionally than
Mm,
banged, such heavy weight. I think I would have been able to listen to my bodies. My levers are quite long, so certain movements for me in the gym over repetitive amounts of time are not actually supportive. So I would have
yeah.
learned to stand up for myself a little more. But I've certainly added more techie things. So I wasn't sawing when I played. We actually have a two-seater hard hyperbaric chamber in my house. Um, the pool training didn't exist. I would have done all my jump training as much as I could, other than playing volleyball in the pool to save my joints. So there's just things that I learned after the fact that would have been great. And they're equally as hard in a different way, but they're still geared more towards doing this forever versus just hammering down on your body.
Yeah. Yeah. So your goal now is being active forever, not necessarily winning a match.
Right. And I like the idea though, I lift weights 3 days a week. I like the idea of, keeping those numbers high and strong, because there's another thing that happens. I sort of feel like emotionally, where you're already getting a head trip that you're getting older, right? Because if nothing else, just facing your own immortality or mortality, it's like that in itself it's just an interesting human question. Then you have children and then all of a sudden they're big and you go, oh, time is rolling. So I think there's so many things, and oh, okay, I have wrinkles, or oh, that's falling, or whatever. And so I think that there's so many things in our lives that can kind of screw with our psyche in
Mhm.
an unproductive way about aging.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of incredible things about age, a little experience. You don't freak out. Oh, I've seen this before. It's going to be fine. Whatever. But when you can also sometimes go into a gym and just grab a weight, and maybe you lift even more than you did 20 years ago, there's something about that that reminds you that also what work you're willing to put in, you can be rewarded for. And that is actually what I always loved about sport.
Mhm. It's I'm thinking about how a healthy body and a body that feels strong like that and gives you that kind of feedback of like, yeah, I did this thing, and you're talking about it, how that has emotional and spiritual impact for people, how the body is kind of a portal to really what is inside of all of it, but it's the entry to feel confident, to feel good, to and like you were explaining, when you get to the gym and you move those weights, it doesn't really have anything to do with the weight, does it?
It doesn't. It has to do with the reminder that if you're smart and strategic and you have a plan and you're willing to be uncomfortable for a bit, that you will be able to maintain a certain real estate. So what does that look like? Posture, physical strength, which for me gives me more stillness. It gives me more self-possession. It makes me when in the moments that if I am leading a space, um, I'm first of all more believable because someone goes, okay, well, without words, I'm going to see that person and think they do something, right? So I'm
Mhm.
not there going, I do this and I do that. I'm not going to waste any time on that. If I can't translate to you just by my being, and I don't mean the aesthetic, the
Yeah.
energy part of it, the sort of dividends get paid after you earn it, um, then I'm not really doing my job. And so there's all these sort of offset um, positive consequences of that hard earned moment that reinforces us in so many ways, other than the weight, that I think is really really supportive and can be really powerful and to bring in other areas of your life.
Yeah, I found sport similar to you in high school, cross country running, and it really became such an important confidence booster for me as a 14-year-old girl. Body image, do I fit in? And sport became like this place where my body shifted from something people might judge me on to a tool to like
Mhm.
go run these races. And that was so impactful for me as a young girl. Did you have that experience?
Yeah, I've always said that. It wasn't just about how does my butt look in these jeans, but it really became this tool that I could jump and I could hit something hard, or I could stop something from happening, or it sort of became this vessel that took me in all these adventures. And so it gave me a break from constantly objectifying myself,
Yeah.
and just a little bit of breathing space from that from time to time gives you the sort of opportunity to really know, well, also, who am I? Because we hear it all the time, like, oh, I'm not my body. And that's how we're informed in the world. But ultimately it's like getting back to that essence. And I think that that space really gives you the opportunity to go there.
I mean, I love what you're saying. You've always, I'm thinking how hard it must have been to always be in the public eye, be a model. You're in a bathing suit all the time. Even now you're like training, and your physicality is always on display your entire life. Has how as That's got to be really hard.
Mostly it's not. And then there
Okay.
are the moments, because I still have some stuff I want to do in work. And I'm like, am I going to run out of time?
Yeah.
Am I not going to look the part anymore? So I don't get to
Okay.
say the thing. And then there's another part of me that's like, it is what it is. And if I can be the best version of myself at whatever age,
Yeah.
um, like fucking let it ride. Like, like at some point, it's just like, you know, I mean, I'm 55 right now. I'm pretty fit, and I still train in a bikini. Um, but let's say I'm going to be 65 or 75 if I'm fortunate, and if somebody came up to me, because they do and they will. Oh, you still look really good for whatever age, right? That they
Mhm.
say. And and then there's a part of me that's like, am I going to bite that hook? Um, and then there's a part of me that's like, oh yeah, that just doesn't have anything to do with me, and I'm just going to be the best I can, and and not and not let that creepy fear voice take over. But I honor it when it shows up. It shows up once in a while, not often, but it does show up, and I just verbalize it. Like, hey, I'm worried I'm going to run out of runway. I won't look the part, so I won't be able to talk about the thing. And then once I do that, I go, okay, and then I move on.
Yeah. So speaking of runway, what are the goals that you're still working towards? I mean, you have such a purpose of helping people live healthier lives. It's core to what you and your husband do.
Mhm.
But you have more that you want to do that's up your sleeve, some more goals?
Yeah, actually, I have probably the biggest project undertaking now that my youngest daughter is, just graduated high school. I sort of will have some more bandwidth, and also I've had more experience. And so I joke that in my 20s, you're talent, right? You're hired by other companies, and then you start to go, oh, there's a shelf life on that. So then all of a sudden you go in your 30s, like, maybe I'm going to create stuff. So you have ideas. Okay, that's great. That would be considered IP. And then you start to go, oh, then in my 40s, it's like, oh, make something. So that's Laird Superfood, right? That's a thing that lives and exists outside of us. And now I go, oh, okay. And then I really start to understand that we are at a time and place where technology is really crushing us. However, there is an opportunity because of technology to really support people in some interesting ways, and ways that I haven't seen yet. Because again, going back to all of this, we have the data. You can get your blood work done. You can do all this stuff. But how do we get you compliant? How do we get you into that good practice? So actually, I'm working on a project right now that will, if I can do it, will be probably bigger than all the things. And that would make sense, right? Like learn, fail, fail. Oh, success, mini success. Okay, fail, learn, learn, learn. Okay, fail. You think that would make sense, that as you go, if
Yeah.
you're taking the lessons and paying attention to the environment and understanding your own craft and what you want to do, and where the flaws are in wellness, after coaching and touching people and being in it and doing it, it sort of would naturally bring you to the next.
You mentioned fail a lot in your hierarchy, your tier of progression through your career. Win, win, fail, fail, fail. You want to
Yeah.
I mean, I believe, in sport at least, failure is a prerequisite for success. It's how you learn. But what's your view around failure, and maybe some of the ones that you've worked through in your life?
Well, I mean, listen, I've had failures in my marriage that I had the grace to learn from. I've had many and continue. What time is it today? I've only had maybe 1 or 2 parental failures today. Um, I and then I've had, physical practice failures. I've had business failures, businesses where I had this idea and it wasn't niche enough, and I was too early. I wasted money. It's just like that's happened because that's how it works. And I don't know very few people, and there might be a couple. They come out of the gates and they somehow hit a bullseye. Um,
Mhm.
that has definitely not been my path. So I, sort of learned through experience and failures.
How do you get through them when I mean, we'll go back to you're such a public figure and people, your life is on display in many ways. How do you navigate through that and have the privacy to, work through it with your family or a failed business? I mean, those are all how have you gotten better at that? Have you trained yourself as you failed? You get better at learning from the lessons?
I think you do. I think you recognize them sooner and it's not the end of the world. But I will say this, even since my 20s, and this has to do with my upbringing, even when I was playing ball and it's sort of everything from the outside probably looked pretty slick. I never pitched a perfect picture. I never did.
Yeah.
I've always been, I think, as genuine as I can be. Some things you have to keep for yourself, but I feel like I've always been that, and that is my upbringing, right? That's being from an island and it, saying it as it is. Having people who impacted me from New York who are very direct. And so I
Mhm.
think I never painted myself in that corner. So I have
Yeah.
never worried about the public side of my job. And again, you want to have certain things you'll keep for yourselves, especially like in a marriage or as a parent. Um, but as genuine as you can be, because then you're not scared of who you are, and you're not
Yeah.
scared of like, am I selling you a bill of goods that is disingenuine? Or if we go out into the real world, which I'm in every single day, am I going to feel like a fraud or a phony?
Yeah.
And so I never did that. So I think that has made the failing and the mistakes and the bullshit just a lot easier.
Mhm. Of an acceptance of yourself, just at a core level.
And also, if I can be like strategic about it, that's not what I'm selling, right? I'm not selling perfect. I'm not selling the perfect anything. So
Yeah.
it makes it a lot easier. Now, if I showed up with a giant beer belly and didn't get off the couch for 6 months, that might be off brand. So, that's the lane I live in, which is like, are you working? It's like, yeah, I'm going to work. And what's so great about that is it almost forces it's a reinforcement of the practice, because part of me is like, hey, that's my job, so better get going. And so it's like, okay, let's go.
Yeah, it's interesting that what you've created is accountability backwards
Yep.
for yourself
Yeah.
in how you show up. I feel like there are a lot of things with you that people might view as opposite, like a strength and softness or
Mhm.
intensity and gentle kindness.
Mhm.
And I feel like you move pretty freely between dualities of character.
Mhm.
Is that accurate?
It's very, I think it's very astute. I think only a few people have ever verbalized that to me, especially in an interview. People who know me know that. It's sort of like the masculine and the feminine. I think I house them, not equally, but I flow in and out of those two energies, so they show up in these ways. And because they're kind of extreme, like when I am intense, I'm intense, and when I'm soft, I'm pretty soft. And now I'm not, crying and sort of, soft in that concept, but it's like, hey, I can hold space for anyone. I can encourage you. I can try to elevate you. I can do all those things, and I like it. And then when it's time to, like, hey, we have to get going, and now there's no room for that, I can do that too. So yeah, I think it's a really astute. I think I was like my own mother and father, quite
Mhm.
frankly. And so maybe I just developed both of those.
Yeah, I mean, there's a term in psychology, reparenting,
Yeah, right.
and I also had absent parents. My father died when I was really young,
Hmm.
and my mom was absent only because she had to work her ass off,
Yeah,
and she had to, commute to Chicago, and she's a single mom with 2 kids,
yeah,
and so she was absent by situation, and my dad was gone, and
yeah,
so my sister and I had a similar experience to you in that, like, there isn't anyone making the dinner or folding my clothes or making sure I get to school in time. There was no one doing that, and it sounds like you had to grow up pretty quickly in a similar way.
yeah. I
Did you have siblings with you that were
No, I'm an only
Yeah.
child. I will say as I've gotten older, what I've learned is I almost feel like we're born into the world and, whatever people, the universe, God goes, okay, here's your assignment.
Mm,
And then you get to do your homework. And for all of us, recognizing our parents have done the best that they can and they're just
yeah,
people, but also they're part of our story and our homework. So it's my job to sort of develop the positives that were from that
yeah,
situation and to heal the parts that were wounded in that situation and be grateful that that's my assignment, um, and also create a new story. uh, stop clinging to the old one because there's so many beautiful stories to tell in our lives. I will say all of this has been made easier, all of it, that I met my husband when I was 25 years old,
mm,
because even though, we certainly had in the beginning, especially kind of we just had to get some learning skills. Um, I had reinforcement. So Laird has always given me the confidence to develop those both sides. And so
mm,
I will say that I wasn't able just to land on that probably all on my own. I might have, but it's a lot easier when you have a partner who's like, yeah, no, be direct. Um, and encouraged me to slide between those two places that felt really good for me.
and a safety where he probably would, if you needed to be soft and vulnerable and sad, that you were safe with him to
Yeah,
do that.
easily. He's the best person when things are not going good because he doesn't flinch. He's not even going to be surprised. It's just like, yeah, okay. So that I think that he has been an interesting person to help influence me, um, in all the ways that I have continued to evolve as an adult.
Can you articulate, or do you really know and understand what your assignment in life is?
I think so. I think this whole sort of independence, or a little bit neglect, was for a couple reasons. One, it made me really really conscious, right? So in the way of, I lived with my aunt and uncle Joe, okay, and they were people who they took what life gave them. And I always said, I used to think in my mind, even very young, 6 7 years old, the idea of, well, how could I create the life I would like? Right. So that environment, being with them never actually understanding, because they went to high school and then he went to Vietnam. No, actually, we're allowed to dream. They were very hardworking people that probably thought you were supposed to always struggle. So I
Mhm.
had that. Then I grew up in the Caribbean with sort of other cultures. So it allows me to be very aware of different cultures and the way things go, and how certain attitudes come across, um, that were really helpful to help me build up all these skills to then be a good steward. I have a really good life, and to be somebody who can hopefully motivate, um, encourage people to the value of taking care of themselves. And
Mhm.
and so I think my homework was to make me better at understanding people and myself, so that I could maybe do that job more effectively. as one of them, one of the things. I think I'm here to be my kid's parent, mom, and
Yeah.
I think I'm certainly here to be Laird's wife as well, like to support him in his quest and his dream and his mission, and to house a space um, to maybe help there as well. So I think it's like all those things happen to just give me the opportunity to be better at all these things over here.
Hmm. I mean, it sounds. I, I'm impressed by um you've done a lot of introspection, it seems like. And if we talked about the sauna and the quiet time, it seems like you've done a lot of thinking and internal work versus we see your external work and the physicality of it. But I, it sounds like you've done both kinds of work.
Even as a young person, I, for whatever reason, always felt self-awareness
Hmm.
and transparency, like not to fool people about who you are.
Yeah.
Not because for me that felt like you're being uh, deceptive, and that never was comfortable for me. So I think that has made me really look at myself so that I could be honest with myself about
Mm.
my own actions, my own thoughts, um, and my why am I doing these things and all of that. So that's been really important to me. It's I was interviewed by a guy named Jim Quick. He does like speed reading and memory and things like that. And he said all of us are walking around with primary questions. Pretty much like he'll say to me, okay, you could not know somebody. Let's say it's a woman, and her primary question when she's going to go into a party would be, I hope they like me. And he goes, you know a lot about her and you've never met her. And he goes,
Mm.
do you know your primary questions? And I was like, actually, weirdly, I do. My primary question is, what's the point? And the one right behind is, what is the right way to act and be in this situation? And those
Mm.
two things have guided me and made it in some ways a lot easier. Maybe I'm not as much fun, um, but I think it's been helpful.
So what's the point? You need to know the purpose of it. You said that earlier on. You need to know kind of why you're doing something, but then it sounds like you're also this adaptive chameleon to a situation and using the right strategies based on what what you walk into, what room you walk into.
Yes,
Is that
but ethics, right?
yeah.
Like constantly being connected to your ethics so that you're being led, because especially when you do a weird job that might be public or pulling you here or there, sometimes you could sort of forget your reasons why you're doing things. So you've got to stay honest with yourself. Even if
Mm.
I say to myself some really unappealing reason why I'm doing something, like I'm doing this just to get attention, whatever, at least I keep the pathway to myself, that street clean. Because the
Mm.
minute we can bullshit ourselves or lie to ourselves or justify, I think we're in real trouble. So that always really felt like I never wanted to lie to myself.
Yeah.
And even if it's like, hey, the dirt's between me and me, but at least I'm still in touch with what the dirt is. I feel like then at least you have a fighting chance. Where when all of a sudden you're validated and justified, I think it lends itself to some real problems later. So also, what's the point can be like when people want to just get together and I don't know, like it's the theater too. For me, I'm not attracted to a lot of theater in life and like hoopla and like grandiose. None of that really. I mean, I appreciate it, but it's never been my thing. Like, okay,
Yeah.
what's the point? Like, what are we doing? Like, really?
When he asked you to articulate your questions, did they roll right off like that? Were
Oh
you
yeah.
like, you have to think about it? No, you knew.
Oh no, I knew. Like literally, I'll see stuff. Okay, I'll give you an example. Like, there's a very great market here called Air One. I love it, and they were not trying. They were selling a single strawberry in a container. Okay, it was like $20 from Japan. Who knows, right? My brain, it drives my youngest daughter absolutely nuts because I'm very practical and functional, which again, less fun. definitely. I walk by, I know exactly what's going on. I see the strawberry. I see it's $20. I go, oh, fuck off. Like, come on. Now I was talking to my friend Janet and she was like, oh my God, I just would have to have it, because I'm always scanning everything all the time. What's the point? What's the point? What's the point? It's like a
Yeah.
grand entranceway. I love it. And if it's an architectural building, great. But if you're doing that just to show someone else that you have a grand entrance, for me, I'm like, what's the point?
Yeah.
So I have to sometimes soften that a little bit, like the idea of doing something just because.
Hmm.
That's always been hard for me.
As you say that, that's some of the things that, I've implemented into my life, like meditation or journaling. There's also, to me, like, well, what's the point? I'll just do it because I'm supposed to do it. But kind of going back to what we earlier said, science is showing that it's good for your brain.
Yeah.
And so I also need to know the why for some of these quieter things, because otherwise I'm like, I'm just not doing anything. I also want to be productive like you, and sort of practical and functional. We share that. I'm
Yeah.
not a Capricorn, but I'm a Virgo. So similar, some of the similar traits.
Yeah.
But knowing the why behind it is motivating for me. It's I love the idea of asking that question of yourself all the time, to when you need to check yourself, and having that kind of like personal accountability, that, if people are listening, maybe what is your question? What if they can figure it out? The one that has popped up and is absolutely why this podcast is here, what's the rush, was also sort of born from, this frenetic lifestyle of chasing, accolades and trophies and all these things and businesses, to like concussion, stop, slow down, and a really beautiful lesson in all of it. So I wouldn't have known what my question was before, but now obviously it's what's the rush, and appreciating that taking time is actually doing something, and is beneficial and is productive and is necessary for our own health.
Yeah. And there's a great Chinese practice of like doing nothing.
I mean, yeah, I'm learning so much. And you've talked a lot about being a constant learner,
Hmm.
which I think is so important. And I am learning a lot about the brain and the body and their connection, which is really cool. Stuff that I intuitively was experiencing as an athlete, but
Mm,
never put it together
yeah.
in this way. Um, but I'm curious what you're studying now, or what you're learning now. I mean, it sounds like you've got a new business on the horizon, but are you
Hmm.
are you a beginner at something?
Well, definitely when you're getting ready to raise capital, you're
Okay.
you're you're really, you're on, hours and hours calls with people from Mumbai who are talking about how certain things work, and what people will expect when you are asking for funds for something. So I think what I am a beginner at right now is looking at the marketplace. And I never believe in studying the marketplace in the way and looking only for white space, because I think it's disingenuine. But based on what I am inspired to do, then learning about that space and seeing where naturally making sense to my personality, Laird's personality, and the people I'm working with, where could we do that better?
Mm,
That certainly has been an interesting learning. So,
yeah.
so in that way, if there were things that authentically we could contribute to improve that space, um,
Mm,
so that I think I've been spending time there for sure. And
yeah.
and I'm always learning, truthfully, as a parent.
Hmm.
Oh, like one technique, no, that's not working. Okay, another technique. It's constant. They're different. They have different personalities. There are different stages and phases. Um, it's just it's constant.
What are they teaching you, your kids?
Well, I mean, I've been a parent for 29 years. 28 years. They've when people talk about surrender, it's really hard to do, surrendering for real. And my children have really taught me this idea, because what you realize is Byron Katie said this to Laird once. I just happened to be standing there, and she said, "You know what the good news is? We were going through something with my middle daughter, who's thriving now, but many years ago she went through a rough patch." She said, "She's either going to choose to do it or she isn't." And then she looked at him and she said, "And the bad news is she's either going to choose to do it or she isn't." And because I am kind of practically minded, I thought, oh, you can try all the strategies and it's still going to come down to that.
Yeah.
And so to surrender them to their path, to their life, has certainly been one of the most challenging and important lessons that my children have taught me. And it is connected to faith. Because we say, oh, I have faith, faith, faith. It's like, no, man, when stuff's happening or you feel tumbled and upside down and you don't know where north is, that is the moment that you have to say, okay, I will give it to you. And so I think on a continuous basis, they have really taught me to surrender and to lean into my faith when it's like I want to try to control everything.
Yeah. Releasing control. That surrender is a big one. Is there something, as we wrap the last question, my question, what's the rush? Is there something you are working on slowing down or releasing or stripping away, editing?
It's an interesting idea. I think you wouldn't maybe know this from the outside, but I have had to come to terms with that I, at times, have struggled with, like when I was younger, especially success. Let's call it success in quotes because it's all bullshit, right? So let's just call it that, worldly success. And so I'm actually not going to slow down. What I am focused on is actually seeing how far I can go and taking off the governors that I so disciplined, like in a disciplined way, put on. Because, be successful, not too successful, stand up, but not too much, because it's sort of like, well, I don't have that right. And it's like, well, actually, if you really want to see how in all the ways that you can contribute, you got to take the brakes off. And as long as it's not to feed the beast, my own ego. So in fact, I'm not intending on slowing down. However, I'm always working on slowing down when I'm listening to people, to my family, to my friends. So that'll be something forever that I'm doing, that I slow down.
Yeah.
I listen to what they're saying fully and wholly and then respond. I'll be doing that. But actually, I'm looking to, to take the foot off the brake.
To release, you're releasing some boundaries maybe that kept you contained. That don't need to be there anymore.
No, because I equated success with collateral damage, which is true. And the most important thing for me when I became an adult and I had the opportunity to be with Laird was my relationship and my family. And so I equated too much of something as something that might be a threat to that. And and I think that's right in a lot of ways. And I think it's wrong.
Well, and you're in a season of your life, just like athletics, where, your kids are leaving the house and are independent, women now. And so there is a season where you can put more energy into something else.
Yeah.
So
And I did
I
did their laundry. I cooked their meals.
Yeah.
They saw me do that. So it's like, part of me is like, I kind of did that,
Yeah, you kind of did.
I kind of did that. Like, there's other ways, weirdly, like I want to make my life, and this might be snotty, but I'm down to own it. I'm good with delegating more and making certain parts of my life easier because I'd like to put my energy into creating other things. And so that is actually where I'm at.
That is amazing. I love it, and I love the intensity. Even when you say it, there is such a clear purpose in where you're going, and such a drive that it seems like you've had your whole life, but it's beautiful to see how even as it shifted and navigated, your drive has still stayed super focused.
Yeah, it has. And it and it's all hands on deck right now, right?
Mhm.
Anybody who's in this space in any which way, we have to help each other be as healthy as possible and protect children and let them be as healthy as possible. And so I think part of the motivation is like, hey, in the calmest possible way, could I participate just a little in making it all of that, more available to people, more achievable, more actionable, whatever that is.
Yeah, it's not the smallest possible way, Gabby. You're making such a great impact in people's health and wellness, and spiritual health and wellness, not just physical health and wellness. I really appreciate
Oh,
that part of you that's come out today. And is there anything you want to wrap with to let folks know about? Any final words of wisdom? I mean,
well,
you've dropped some great
I
knowledge bombs already.
I don't know about wisdom. One thing I've really been circling on for several years now is just to remind people that, y- you know, it's kind of on us, and and the job is, and at a time when you'll say, my aura ring said I slept great. It's like, okay, how do you feel? And
Mm.
because I feel the most important thing as our attention gets pulled in all these directions, the importance to being connected to us, to our hearts, to our essence, to how we're feeling, to what we want, to how we'd like to move, to the kinds of food we want to eat. It's like giving people the confidence to go, yes, it takes a little work to figure that out and it changes, but it's so worth it. And it's also like your duty, because then that allows you to show up in your special life the way you're meant to. And so I just want to encourage people, build the practice, but build it in a way that reflects who you are.
Yeah, and it's a getting to know yourself sort of practice. Really getting to know
Yeah.
your ringmate, say it, but you are actually already know it in yourself, and getting to know your body as yours.
As yours.
Such a
By the
yeah.
way, in certain ways, I move terribly, like so bad. Kelly Starr, if he saw it, he'd be
Yeah,
like, oh my God, is that a squat? So I just want to remind people, it doesn't all have to be perfect to do it.
that's
That's not
right.
what it is. And I wrestle with that all the time.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's a great thing, to letting go of perfectionism. I'm all for that. Well, Gabby Reece, thank you for the time today. I would love to do a workout in person. Hopefully, we'll meet
Great.
in real life
Great.
one of these days, and get to be outside and be in nature together. And thanks to all of you who are tuning in for today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation.
Hey, it's a long and dusty road and a hot and heavy load. Folks I meet ain't always kind. Some are bad, some are good, some have done the best they could. Some have tried to ease my troubling mind. And I can't help but wonder where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Can't help but wonder where I'm bound.